the thing that got me was that by 2025, 2/3 of the world's population may face water shortages. And I thought, gosh, that's right around the corner. I mean, we're almost at 2023, and I don't think people are speaking enough about this idea of water shortage. So currently, yes, there may be haves and have-nots in that we've been talking about today, certain areas that are under more stress than others. But I think indeed that this statistic makes it clear that every region of the world is going to face this problem. And I wonder, what can regions that might not be feeling it yet do proactively today to avert a further crisis or shortage, given that these positives that you mentioned, that there are institutions that do work to, conserve efforts or, and make sure we cooperate well. Is there anything more that we can do proactively to avert further shortages?
Absolutely. And I agree with you that that's definitely needed, because the trend that we're seeing, in spite of the positive news that I mentioned, the trend that we're seeing is quite negative, right? There are estimates, if we go not only to 2025, but maybe 2050, there are estimates by the UN that say up to 8 billion people could then be affected by water scarcity, at least for 1 month a year. There are other estimates that say by 2030, so not that long, there might be around 700 million people displaced because of water scarcity. So that will, of course, also have its effects, its repercussions on even countries that might themselves not yet face such crisis. So in any case, countries should prepare, whether they'll be affected directly or indirectly. And the ones maybe affected less or more indirectly, such as European ones or parts of North America, can then help other countries to adapt. And I would say we can look at it in 2 times 2 dimensions. We have to address the supply and the demand side, and we have to address the more technical side, including the finances that we need for that, and the governance side. When we think about the supply side, there's relatively little that we can do, given that the overall amount of water that's available is limited. Of course, we can speak about desalination, but that is only an option for very small places and for very small use, given the huge amount of energy that we need for this technology. But what we can do on the supply side is protecting our watersheds, protecting our ecosystems from land degradation, from erosion, from pollution that would negatively affect the availability of the water that is there. But then the demand side is where we can actually do much more, right? If we think how much water is being used where. Agriculture, for example, is the biggest consumer of water worldwide. It's 70% in global average, but if we think about areas such as Iraq, Iran, the broader Middle East, their agriculture consumes more than 90% of the water. So very water scarce region with agriculture consuming way more water than in the global average. So clearly here, something needs to be done and something can be done in terms of adapting crops, but obviously also in terms of irrigation technology, increasing efficiency. Water loss reduction is something. There are places like Tehran, for example, where we know that up to 1/3 of the water in the cities that's used for urban water supply is lost in pipes because of leakages, because of the poor maintenance of the system, partly, of course, also related to the sanctions, but not only. So that's what we can do on the demand side. And then if we look at the technical versus the governance side, there are a lot of technical solutions available. I mentioned more efficient irrigation technology, wastewater treatment, recharging aquifers, using treated wastewater in agriculture, and so on. But this technology, where we've seen a lot of advances in the last years, also needs to be made available. And typically the countries that suffer the most from water scarcity already, or will in the future because of climate change, are the countries that have very limited access to technology and not the financial resources available to actually access that. And that's something that all countries, also the global north, the international community together can tackle. And that's definitely something that needs to be done. But then also looking at the governance side, it's hardly ever water itself that is the problem, but it is really how water is being managed, how water is governed, whether there is an effective legal framework and an effective policy framework for managing water resources, whether such framework ensures equity or disadvantages certain groups that might then hold grievances and maybe protest, which could lead to insecurity. All that needs to be addressed, and institutions need to be strengthened. What we know from research coming out of Oregon State University is that water tends to only lead to conflict if the institutions that exist, the government, from the local to the national to the international level, if these institutions are not resilient or are not adapted enough to deal with water-related change. If we have well-functioning institutions that can, for example, in times of drought, provide support to people, can provide support to farmers to overcome a certain drought period, or can provide the support, the capacity building as well, to invest into new irrigation technologies, or to change crops from the cotton that we mentioned earlier for Uzbekistan to some less water intensive crop, then countries and individual people find it much easier to adapt to the new situation that we'll all be facing. But of course, implementing all of that has been a challenge and remains a challenge, and will probably be even more challenging in the future, given that the pressures are increasing.